Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Once again, I have the privilege of hosting someone for a conversation. We talk about business communication. And again, this week, I have an expert that you and I will definitely want to hear. Pierre Quinn. I became acquainted with Pierre when I watched Joseph Michelli interview Pierre a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I know that my Biz Communication Show listeners and viewers will want me to host Pierre. So I'm delighted to do that today. Pierre is based in Laurel, Maryland. As a speaker, he has keynoted on stages with more than 2,000 attendees. As a corporate trainer, he has worked to develop people across disciplines and industries. As an author, he has written two books that focus on empowering aspiring and emerging leaders. I love the title of the books, Leading While Green and Leading While Scared. I don't know about you, but at different times in my leadership career, I've been both. So those books are very much needed. Pierre helps emerging leaders identify their strengths and increase effectiveness within their circles of influence so that they can lead with courage and confidence. So join me in welcoming Pierre Quinn to the Biz Communication Show. Hello, Pierre.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great today. And as I review the major teachings that you have with your clients, one of the things that I noticed is that you you strongly emphasize the value of good listening skills. Now, suppose you came to my organization.
Mhm.
I'm a supervisor or even a CEO, and my team has told you in your consultations with them that I have very inadequate, very poor listening habits. What would you do when you had the opportunity to coach me? How would you help me develop my listening skills?
One of the things that we would probably do, I would ask, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite television show? Your favorite piece of media? And I would say, let's watch this together. Let's watch 15, 20 minutes of your favorite show. And I'll say, let's write down all of the key points in the dialogue of that show. Now, many people will get distracted maybe about by the action scenes or the color or part of the story and totally miss the dialogue that's happening that really sets the framework for everything else. And through that exercise, we will begin to walk through as a person sees, wait, I'm missing all of this because I'm being distracted by all of these other elements. And then I'd flip the question. So where could you be doing the same thing with your team? Of course, the light bulb will go off and we could use that as a leverage point to being more attentive to the interactions that are happening in the workplace.
That is a fantastic exercise. I have stressed listening skills since 1997. And there's one incident I remember that you can relate to. I was going to speak to a group in Atlanta, and the chairman of the group asked me, as they often do, what's your topic? We'd like to give it some publicity. So I gave them the topic, listen your way to the top. So when I get there and they have a printed program, my topic is listed as speak your way to the top. And so
Relate to this.
I pulled the host aside and I said, I don't want to embarrass you or anybody, but this is a wonderful way for me to illustrate how we really don't catch the point that listening is more powerful than speaking. And so she let me share that with the group. We not only got a chuckle out of the mistake, but we got a lesson there as well. You don't, and many people think, and I'm a professional speech coach, but as much as I teach people about giving communication, we've got to have listeners out there. And as you deal with managers
Mhm.
and supervisors and emerging leaders, my guess is that this is something you have to give a great deal of attention to with them.
From your work for doing this work for decades, you're intimately familiar with the reality that, especially from the leadership position, Quite often, we are guilty of listening just to respond. We don't get clarity on what was said. We don't filter through the noise. We don't go through the variables of interpretation. It's okay, Bill said something. I don't agree with Bill. I'm not even clear on what his point was. I just know a section of what he said I don't agree with. And as soon as he's finished talking, I'm going to give him all of my retort to what he said. And a lot of misunderstandings happen in organizations simply because we didn't take a few extra moments to clarify what we thought we heard and then offer a response instead of a reaction. So I go into settings all the time and you literally watch teams just cutting each other off. And many times they're saying the same things, but because they have not taken the time to pause, to process, to reflect, to really listen clearly before they formulate that response, it creates a really tragic cycle.
I of course, hear you echoing Stephen Covey when he said in his chapter 5, "Seek first to understand and then to be understood." He said, as you just said, most of us are not listening. We're just waiting our turn to speak. And the other day, Pierre, for some reason, I thought of a statement I'd heard years ago. Pardon me for keeping on talking after you interrupted. Well, getting back to that exercise that you have of having a client that you're coaching watch a movie and then have them tell you back what was the major dialogue. That's marvelous, and particularly, I think, where you stress that it's distractions that keep us from seeing that, and the distractions can be something very ordinary. I like what this person's wearing today, or they're nodding their head a lot, or just anything that keeps us from focusing on the words themselves. So that exercise is one. Have you got that copyrighted? I think a lot of people would like to use that one.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to make sure we get this copy written. So, yeah, but it's good because a lot of times as leaders we're looking for the great. What's a great idea? What's something I can use quickly? What's a training component that I can quickly insert? So I've gotten a lot of great ideas from people over the years that having copywritten it. So, yeah, that's a freebie we'll give to your listeners to your tribe.
That's a great freebie, and my guess is it's going to be used a few hundred times in the next year because it is so marvelously easy and tremendously effective as well. I noticed on your bio that you've done a lot of work with higher education. I spent 5 years as a university faculty member. I spent 2 decades in higher education administration. So I'm interested, and I know that our listeners are interested. What are the major communication problems that you find as you deal with higher education institutions, and how do you go about resolving those problems?
Oh man, Bill, how much time do we have?
Not an hour. That it would take that.
Yeah, we find, and I know your experience in higher ed, there's a lot of the silo effect that happens in higher ed institutions. And it's the same as we were talking about before as it relates to listening. Every department, every academic discipline can sometimes feel like they're the only one that matters in at the institution of higher learning. They're the one that brings in, the most revenue or the most notoriety or the most research funding, and sometimes we elevate ourselves in these conversations to make us feel like we're a little bit better or position ourselves better in the organizations. And if the outcome is the same, supposedly our outcome to educate students for the future, then we should be more than willing to have a internal dialogue between departments and disciplines. But I've been in meetings where one department has an idea, and if everyone doesn't rally around them, it can get pretty nasty. And the other department, maybe they don't have the same amount of funding or same amount of backing, but they both have the same mission of supporting students and presenting qualified scholars to the workforce. And if one or two of those individuals in that meeting just took a pause and said, "Wait, we're aiming for the same things. I know we're different academic disciplines. I know we're different departments on the org chart, but how can I really hear what the needs or concerns are of this leader of this department? And then in what way can I better position? Maybe I have more resources. Maybe I have a connection. Maybe I have a deeper foray into our alumni network that can benefit both of us. But we'll never get to that space of clarity if we're only thinking about our department or only thinking about when it's our turn to speak. And it's a shame that it happens in institutions of higher learning, and of course in corporations and nonprofits across the country and across the world. But the lack of being willing to listen, to pause and think, wait, what's Bill saying as the chair of the communications department, who has a different liberal arts budget than maybe me in biology research? What is he saying about his challenges? And maybe how can my experience in my department, my discipline with our team be beneficial to Bill? But I'll never be able to offer some advice, perspective, or even support if I don't listen to what's going on with you.
Well said. I think I would add to that. I would imagine that you find, as I did, and I doubt that the scene has changed very much, that there are multiple meetings that it reminds me. One time I wrote an article for Rotary magazine about there being too many meetings. The title of it was, "Is this meeting really necessary?" And somebody sent me a little plaque which I kept on my desk for a long time. It said, "Most meetings are held for no other reason than it's been a month since the last one."
So
So,
true.
don't you? No, I can't lead the question. Have you found a multiplicity of unnecessary routine meetings that bog down progress in academia?
In the academic framework, and I know we can't speak for all institutions, right, Bill?
Correct.
But there is sometimes this idea that simply talking about it is taking action on it. And we talk because we want to hear ourselves talk. We talk because we have a point to prove. We talk because it makes us feel like we've checked off a box and have actually moved toward a solution. But if we could, I know COVID has been a challenge for organizations across the world. But if a benefit of it is the reduction in meetings, I'll take that benefit in the middle of a devastating pandemic. But some people are just grateful that they don't have to sit through another 2 or 3 hour departmental rehash with no real agenda and no real action. And if we took just a quarter of the time that we spend in pointless meetings, actually operationalizing the mission and attacking problems, we would see a dramatic turnaround in how higher education is administered literally around the world.
We could also apply that to corporations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We waste so much time, a meeting to have a meeting about when we're going to schedule the next meeting. And I know you've seen so many of those business memes and cartoons. This should have been an email. This could have been a phone call. This could have been a text message. And if we're really concerned about bottom line in our organizations and trimming off unnecessary expenses, great organizations always audit their meetings. And do we have the right people in the room talking about the right things for the right amount of time? And a lot of cost savings can be applied to, are we spending too much time in meetings that's taking away our intellectual capacity and our ability of our people to actually do the job instead of just talking about it?
Sometimes in higher education, I wondered if I should have as my epitaph on my tombstone, "I'm still in a meeting." You talk some, very persuasively about leaders becoming more visible and accessible.
Yeah.
Give us your thoughts about that, please.
So when you look at a lot of the military stories of old and some of the formative narratives on those crucible moments in wartime, individuals will often remark in autobiographies and these biopics of when the battle was the hardest, when it was the most devastating, the fact that you could look over and see your leader on the horse or carrying the flag or still leading the charge or still
From George Washington on.
all the way, the ability to look at the leader in the most difficult times, George Washington is a great icon of this, in the most difficult times, and see the leader still pushing and leading the charge and fighting is an internal rallying cry, and it leads to a greater demonstration of courage from the people who are in the fight. So what sometimes we find in organizational life is people, you know, they enjoy the safety of the maybe the ivory tower of academia.
The boardroom.
They like the space. They like even the safety sometimes of the Zoom call, as opposed to, something is going wrong. There's a challenge, there's a complaint, there's a miscommunication. And for visibility of leaders, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are on the front edge of solving the problem. Sometimes it simply means you're on the front edge or leading edge of supporting the people who are solving the problem. And the leadership presence, being there, sitting in the space, offering support, feedback, and guidance. And when your team, when your organization knows that you're in the fight, you're in the room, you're in the trenches with them, it leads to, that speed of trust that Covey talks about. When I see you in it with me, and not just walled up in your office or walled up in a whole bunch of meetings to avoid the situation, I develop more trust in you, and I develop more courage in myself because I know you're there.
Terrific. I'd like to add to that that this can be reinforced on a very informal level as well. One of the points I've often made is when we used to call them the suits. People don't wear suits very much anymore. But when the suits, whatever we call them now, go into the company cafeteria, don't just sit together. Go sit with people in the organization that you don't know, people who don't get appointments with you, but people who really make the organization go and click. Share a meal with them, ask about their families and their hobbies, show them that genuinely you're interested as a person. That's just as important as being on the front lines in the battle.
I can't remember who said the quote or even where I read it from, but this idea that, growing up, a person said, I was learned to treat the janitor with the same respect that I treat the CEO. And I think from the executive, from the dean, from the president of, higher ed, we've been talking about, even now in COVID, the space, well, some are distant and we can't get together, but there's, what would it be like if you were an account manager or a customer service representative and you had a 20-minute phone call, or 20-minute Zoom chat, or 30-minute lunch with the president of the company, or the someone from the senior executive team, or someone from who is a senior leader. For me, if I'm in that spot and a senior leader has a 15-20 minute conversation with me asking about, my journey with the organization, my challenges, the things that I want to celebrate, that's going to do wonders. I'm going to become in a sense the evangelist for that executive leader. This is a great person. They listened to my concerns. We had a great conversation. They were interested in what I was interested in. And I'm going to push the culture forward simply from a 10-15 minute phone call. And I think as leaders, especially with the time that we have and the tech that we have, we were talking about this earlier, the ability to do it and the access to people that we have right now is unparalleled. And those touches, those present moments of leaders in an informal way will definitely leverage and move forward the culture, as you were saying.
Must have been 25 years ago before we really got into technology. There was still a book written, High Tech, High Touch. And that's what we're talking about. Address people not just as employees, but as people. And as a result, if you're genuine about it, they will become not only your allies, they'll become the best support that you've got in the organization. And again, we do this genuinely, not from a utilitarian point of view. This time has flown by, and I want to thank you so much, Pierre, for being a guest on the Biz Communications Show. Wonderful insights, and I encourage people to get your books, to go to your LinkedIn page. And so please tell us your contact information that you'd like for us to know.
The best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn and you type in Pierre Quinn, you'll see my face there. There's a dimple on one side in that headshot, so you won't be able to miss me. But also, the second best place to reach me is on my website. That's Pierre C. Quinn. That's pierrecquinn.com. The C is in the middle because somebody already had Pierre Quinn. Apparently, there's a cooler Pierre Quinn somewhere in the world that hopped on that URL. So Pierre, the letter C, Quinn.com is the second best place to reach me.
Thank you for that. And I know people will want to connect with you. And now that you've given your contact information, I'll give mine, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is B-I-Z, bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and leaders. Give me a call so that we can discuss your communication problems and challenges and talk about how I can help you find solutions to them. Pierre, any closing thoughts for us as we pull together our topic today?
There are a lot of individuals that I wrestle with that wrestle with courage. And my definition of courage is closing the gap between where you are now and where you're called to be. And one simple step, one simple action can help close that gap. And for a lot of us, it's a phone call. It's a Zoom call like this. And I know you're nervous to reach out to that leader, to that expert, to that potential mentor, to that influencer that can help you advance your career or maybe land a big contract. And you get really nervous when you think about sending that email or pushing the buttons on your phone. But the nervousness that you feel, the uncertainty that you feel is just a biological response. Your body is literally making enough energy for you to follow through with that task. So whenever you feel nervous, whenever you feel unsure, channel that energy into hitting send on that email or making that phone call, sending that text message, because you are one conversation away from a transformed life.
And one of the things you found, as I have, Pierre, just to tag onto that great advice, is that many people who you think would not welcome an approach, they're much more open than you would imagine. And that's, in one sense, that's why they're at the top. And so that should reduce the fear some, knowing that you will be reaching significant people, many of whom got there because of their people skills and their openness, right?
Absolutely. There's so many people who literally want to pay it forward because they cannot pay back the mentors and coaches and supporters that they've had over the years. And they are waiting. This is very key. They are waiting for authentic conversation. Authentic conversation will move you to the top of the list when it's not just about your need or your wish, your desire, your getting access to their platform, but an authentic conversation to learn their story and their journey will leave a memorable impression. And because of the technology that we have right now, we have unparalleled access to people that we've never had in any time in Earth's history. So take advantage and activate your courage and reach out to someone.
Yes, indeed. Pierre, thank you again for being our guest. Thanks to those of you who have joined us on the video portion or the podcast portion of the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. Be with us next week for another program that will help you with your business communication.